Hello, everyone, and welcome to Developing a Mobile Strategy to Reach Our Clients. Today's presenters are going to include Mike Monahan, the Pro Bono Director at the State Bar of Georgia Pro Bono Project, Raquel Cullen, the Director of Development at the Legal Services of Northern Virginia, Gwen Daniels, the Director of Technology Development at Illinois Legal Aid Online, Tony Liu, Citizenship Works Project Coordinator at the Immigration Advocates Network, Liz Keith, Law Help Program Manager at Pro Bono Net, and I'll be moderating. I'm Xander Carson. I'm the Law Help Program Coordinator, also at Pro Bono Net. So today we are going to our goal today is to sort of take a look at what type of mobile technologies best fit your needs, what should you take into account, really sort of looking at the beginning steps, the first steps of considering mobile content, a mobile development plan, things that as mobile technologies have progressed, looking back, folks wish they had taken into account, and things as some of these new projects are gearing up that people are taking into account. So we're going to do a general just overview of mobile technologies and some terms that folks should know. We're going to have a couple of examples of looking at SMS and text messaging campaigns, as well as some examples of web-based or of web applications, and also, although it didn't make it into the slide, some considerations for customizing content to mobile, and then we'll take a very brief look forward to sort of what are new technologies coming up in the future. So we've heard it a lot that mobile is an important part of any sort of tech plan, and these are just some statistics that I pulled in preparation for this. And although, we know that cell phone users are really prevalent, especially in our client population, what's new this year is that smartphones are now the majority of cell phones that are being used. It's jumped from 35% to 56% in the last 2 years. Also, as you can see, the percentage of web traffic from mobile-specific devices has increased dramatically, as has the number of smartphones that are in households that earn less than $30K a year. It's almost doubled, which is incredibly important for our client base, and really looking at mobile technologies as a way as sort of the access point for our clients to get the legal information and referral services that they're looking for. It becomes clearer and clearer that our content should be really geared towards mobile technologies. And really quickly, sort of looking at, there are 3 key terms when we talk about sort of defining mobile that, we throw around a lot, and taking a second to really identify and define them is important at the outset. So SMS and the SMS campaigns are text messages. Almost all cell phones can receive and send text messages. By far, it is one of the most accessible. You don't need a smartphone. It'll work on just about any cell phone. Apps are the actual downloadable applications. They run on a smartphone. They run typically off of the smartphone. You don't necessarily need access to the internet to use them, because they're housed actually on your smartphone or on your mobile device. And they're typically accessible through things like the Google Play Store or through the Apple Store for download. And then mobile sites are websites that have layout or content that's designed and optimized for browsing on a mobile device. For these, you do need access to the Internet to obviously access that site. There are a couple of different ways that sites become mobile optimized. One is a responsive design where the site itself within the code just basically rearranges for a mobile device so that it becomes more easily accessible on that device. It's essentially the same site. It's simply got a different layout for a mobile device. A dedicated mobile site is almost a second site where mobile users go that typically looks similar to the desktop version of the site, but is optimized for mobile users. There are also hybrids of these two, where some of the responsive design aspects are pulled in for what may be a dedicated site. So with sort of that very brief overview, I'm going to we're going to turn to sort of specific examples of SMS campaigns, and I'm going to hand it off to Mike Monahan.
All right. All right. I've lost the PowerPoint there, but I'll pull mine up. Anyway, there we go. Now, just a second, folks. And pardon me there. In any event, good day, everybody. I'm Mike Monahan with the State Bar of Georgia Pro Bono Project. I work on some technology grants here, and I'm really looking at technology grants related to our statewide websites, and I manage the statewide advocate site as well. One idea we had for working or developing our websites, our statewide websites even further, was to figure out how we get information from that website to people who actually need it. Quiz. How many of you know that I posted 5 great new resources yesterday on my website? None of you, right? How do you know when someone posts something to the website? How do you know how to go and get it? How do you retrieve information that's out there? And there's a lot of information out there. So we've decided to work with a number of states on a technology grant from the Legal Services Corporation for 2013 and 2014, a 2-year grant involving Pro Bono Net, Georgia Legal Services Program, Illinois Legal Aid Online, the Northwest Justice Project, and the Law Help New York Consortium. Pro Bono Net, of course, Illinois, Georgia, and Georgia, Northwest Justice Project, and Law Help New York are all part of the Pro Bono Net network, and Illinois Legal Aid Online has a different platform, and so we're working together to find ways to take our client content and put it out there for the public to easily access. So those are the partners, a 2-year grant, and what we're doing is starting with our statewide legal information websites. We know that across the country we have a lot of great content for low-income clients and client base that they could use. And we know that we have a lot of social services and legal services referral information on those websites as well. So the question is, how do you get that information out to the public? And how do you be really specific about it? What are the most salient pieces of information we have on our websites? What are the most critical legal needs? What's an emerging legal need that we need to let people know about right away? Is there a foreclosure issue that's new on the scene? Is it a Medicaid nursing problem, a Medicaid nursing home coverage problem that's cropping up in your area? We want to find out ways that we can isolate legal information very specifically, create a resource around a group of resources, and then get that information completely out to the public in terms of perhaps a video, perhaps a form or two, perhaps some brochures on that particular subject. But we can look closely at our websites, figure out what's the best content and what's the most relevant, either in time and place, and make that available. So what we'll do is we'll be contracting with a platform, an organization that provides the text messaging, and we have a process where we're going to have each state look at its content and figure out what's the best content, how it wants to package some campaign, some special campaign around that content, and then we'll go to Pro Bono Net and Illinois and say, this is the content that we want to send out to the public, make available in a packaged way, and those programs, those vendors, Pro Bono Net and Illinois, I'm calling Illinois a vendor, but essentially it is in this sense because it's working on behalf of the non-Pro Bono Net states that will sort of serve as a model for that kind of delivery and API feed. Then, once we figure that out, we'll also be working with a marketing program, a marketing vendor, a contractor, to help us look at these things and develop materials, brochures, flyers, ads, PSAs, things like that, to tell people that we have this content and how to access that content. And we'll be allowing each state to sort of individualize its marketing campaign. So, for example, I say here in Georgia, we think protective orders, and escaping from family violence is still a very important issue. So we might create a campaign around getting the protective orders off of our website and onto the mobile phones of users around Georgia. So we could say you could text you could text protective order to 99699, and that customer, the client, would receive back tailored information about domestic violence. So, for instance, we could send out links to our domestic violence training, our domestic violence packet, a protective order, and where to go or where to file the protective order. You could think of a number of ways to package that information and present it in a way that's informative and maybe very useful, for instance, to a person who is not literate but could use information that is oral rather than written. So you could provide videos instead of brochures, for example. So you could think kind of outside the box in how you want to provide the information in your campaign. I want to stay in my time here as well. But part of the effort is also to create an outreach toolkit so that at the very end of the process, we leave the states with a toolkit about how to go about creating further campaigns and keeping their projects going. And other states that might be interested could pick up and run with this project as well. So they could also begin working on their texting campaigns and using this toolkit as a model and best practices approach for reaching out and using what's best on their websites and what's most important to the client community at any given time. What's interesting about this messaging campaign is that you could adopt something that's appropriate in time. So, for instance, you have a disaster in your community, much as we had up in New York and New Jersey, or tornadoes recently here in Georgia, where you could design a quick campaign and get information out on disaster legal services, what you might have on your website in that area. And as I mentioned before, maybe foreclosure still is an issue in your community. And maybe now it's renters' issues of formerly foreclosed properties, and you need to get information out quickly to people. So having a way to reach into your website, pull it out, and push it right out to the community is what we're really interested in doing. And so those are my slides, and I'm going to pass that off now to Raquel. Let's see. Just a moment, please. And let me find Raquel in my list.
Hi, my name is Raquel Colon. I'm the I'm the Director of Development with Legal Services of Northern Virginia, and I'm happy to present today our concept of the appointment reminder system. We are a 2012 LSE TIG grantee, and this is a 24-month project. The basis behind the concept behind the appointment reminder system is on notifying. Sorry, I'm getting a message that you're not seeing my slides.
I'm seeing them over here. There may just be a delay for some people, but I think we're generally okay.
Okay. The objective of this project is to develop an automated telephone system that would place appointment reminder callers to our clients. The idea is to notify clients via SMS message, email, or voice message of their upcoming office appointments or court hearing dates. The system uses a cloud telephone platform that interfaces with Kemp's case management system. We thought about the need of the project, and we came up with several ideas. The main goal that we had was to reduce the number of no-shows. Automatic appointment reminder systems are common in other industries, for example, in the medical field where you have notifications that are sent out of doctor's appointments or within the school system. But what we wanted to create was a new and unique and innovative way to address a very real problem for legal services providers. Like all legal aids, we frequently have applicants who fail to keep a scheduled appointment. For example, in 2012, we had 884 clients or applicants did not show up for their scheduled appointments. So to help reduce the problem of chronic no-shows, we wanted to come up with a system that would help us to notify clients of their upcoming appointments. We recognize that many low-income clients have access to cell phones, smartphones, and other technological devices that have SMS messages, voicemail, and email capabilities. As noted on this slide, a September 2011 Pew Internet and American Life Project survey indicated that 73% of all Americans now use their cell phones for text messaging. Therefore, it was important for us to be able to integrate legal aid and technology. We established 4 major goals as part of this project. The first was to increase efficiencies in the intake and client services delivery process by eliminating the need to allocate our limited resources to efforts surrounding rescheduling applicants. The second goal was to increase utilization of our telephony system by reducing the number of calls for missed and our rescheduled appointments on our dedicated intake lines, thereby increasing capacity for new applicants. The third major goal was to minimize the amount of time an applicant has to wait for a new appointment. And then the fourth goal was to increase the efficient use of our case handlers' appointment stock by reducing the number of filled but untimely unused appointments. How does the system work? Well, we will work with the developer to create an application programming interface or an API. There are currently some vendors out there that have this telephony application programming interface or API platform. An example of these are included in your slides. And also, one of the vendors that we are interested in is Twilio Cloud Communications. Twilio provides a cloud API for voice and SMS communication that leverages existing web development skills, resources, and infrastructure. It also easily integrates notification with existing software and workflow through Twilio's simple API and markup language. We also wanted to develop a customized appointment calling system that would consume extracted appointment data, place daily appointment reminder calls, and also log transaction data and expose call log information for call placement reporting and metrics. One of the configurations that we want to put in place is a reporting mechanism that will allow us to extract daily call volume, call status reporting, detailing the number of successful, failed, busy line, human answered, and machine answer called events. Oops, went ahead too far. Case management. We realized that in order to make this project successful, we needed to integrate it with Kemp's Casework, which is our case management system, as Kemp's will serve as a bridge between the API functions and the database. The developer will collaborate with CHEMS to extract pertinent LSNV client appointment information from the different mapping fields that are in CHEMS client field and calendaring system. Because we provide legal services to numerous victims of domestic violence, we are conscious about developing codes and fields within the mapping structure that will not send text or voicemail messages to domestic violence clients who are not in a safe environment. Where do we go from here? Well, we are currently in phase 1 of the project, which involves project discovery, planning, and requirement of documents. We are following the rapid application development methodology, which includes the 4 phases that are outlined in this slide. Some of these other items that we will be working on as part of these phases include design, creating a messaging script, development, programming, beta testing, integration, implementation, and delivery. Currently, to satisfy LSC grant conditions as part of this TIG grant, we currently have a request for proposals for potential vendors to develop a customized appointment calling system, and our RFPs are due back this Friday. Our goal is to make the program or the system accessible to other languages other than English, as we currently provide telephone intakes in English, Spanish, and Korean. We believe that the appointment reminder system will improve and increase access to justice for low-income individuals. And I will now pass it over to Gwen.
Really quickly, before we move on to sort of mobile-based, or apps, I just wanted to call out a couple of things that are going on in the chat box. Norman had asked a question about using SMS and whether we felt that people would have an issue receiving text messages from a number that they didn't recognize. And I just wanted to pause for a second and say that, number one, it's a really interesting question and one that we're looking forward to sort of exploring more as these projects develop. And the other sort of piece of that is for each of these, folks do have to text into a number before they can receive that information. There was also a question about, with how texting and SMS campaigns would work within the sort of broader mobile context where there is so much information from web-based designs out there already. And there's been some really interesting sort of responses to that in the chat box. The only thing that I also wanted to add was that oftentimes for folks who don't have regular access to the Internet, being able to receive a link or other identifying information to then find a desktop, especially at a public library, where people can, where oftentimes people use library computers as an access point to the Internet, can be really helpful in sort of channeling their searches. There's some, but like I said, there's some really interesting information in the chat box as well, and some really great conversations that are happening. So with that, I'm going to mute myself again and hand it over to Gwen.
I'm Gwen Daniels. I'm the Director of Technology Development at Illinois Legal Aid Online. As previously been mentioned, we are a little different than most of the states in that we have our own organization that is responsible for our statewide websites. We are on our own homegrown platform, and one of the things that we have done is created actually 2 apps, and the one I'm going to talk about is the Legal Aid app. There's also a Pro Bono app, and we went through pretty much the same development process for both. Both are available for iOS and for Android through iTunes and through the Google Play Store. So the Illinois Legal Aid app was part of a 2010 TIG grant given to Pine Tree Legal Assistance up in Maine, and we were a co-partner with them, and they did a couple of their own apps. The Legal Aid app launched in September of 2011. It's had 7,500 downloads through iTunes and about 6,000 active Android downloads, and about 2,000 of them are still active. Apple doesn't give us a way to track who has actually kept the download on their device. I'm going to talk more about how we actually went through the process of developing the apps. And the first thing that we do, not just with this project, but with all of our projects, is to go through and create a project charter, which is simply a document that the people in the organization and outside of the organization who are involved in the project all sort of sign off on. In this case, it was myself as the developer, Terry Ross, who is our program director, and then our legal content managers. And what it does is it just outlines the purpose of the project, sort of defines the scope, defines who's responsible for what, who's responsible for the tech piece, who's responsible for selecting the content and for the marketing and the outreach pieces. We also go through and define some scenarios of how we envision people actually using the mobile app. We do a very, very basic technical requirements document so that we're all sort of on the same page. I will turn around then and build that into something much, much bigger. We always also include a promotion piece because there's no point in building all these technology solutions if you're not going to have a plan for how to promote it and market it to the community, and also a basic timeline. The second thing that we do after we have this project charter and we start to define what we're building is to actually sit down and we actually do prototypes for everything. You can do them on paper, PowerPoint, Illustrator. We actually use Axure, which is a rapid prototyping software. It's about $300 at the nonprofit rate. Balsamic Mockups is very similar. But it's free. The desktop version is free to nonprofits. And what it does is it lets me both Balsamic and actually let me go through and draw up what the app would look like and add on-click functionality so that I can actually click through and demo it to anyone, to the rest of our staff and other interested parties before we actually sit down and try to write any code. Because what you don't want to do is hand this off to a developer or start coding it yourself and realize that it's not what anyone wanted. There's a number of technical considerations when you're going to do mobile apps. First of all, you need to decide what platform. Are you going to do this for iOS? Or are you going to do this for Android? Are you going to, if you're going to do, one or both, are you going to write it, natively in Objective-C if you're doing it for iOS or Java for Android? Or are you going to do what we did and use a third-party application that lets you write it in JavaScript and HTML and then wrap it up into something that runs natively? The big thing, if you're going to do anything with iOS, is Apple even going to approve it? What happened with this TIG grant is our apps got approved, and then one of Pine Tree's did, and the other two were not approved. And what that means is we spent all this time building it, and then Apple says, yeah, we don't think it's useful enough, or we don't like the interface enough, so we're not going to approve it, and it's never going to go in the iTunes store. Nobody's ever going to be able to use it on an iDevice. So I would encourage anyone who's going to do mobile apps to really look at both Apple and Google's guidelines for submitting. Google will let you submit pretty much anything, but they will take it down later if there's problems. You also have to think about who's going to build it. We did ours in-house because we have our own development shop. It's basically me and a couple of contract developers. For most people, it's probably going to have to be outsourced. And then the big thing is, how are you going to maintain it? Forgetting the issue of keeping the content up to date, Google and Apple both release new versions almost every year, and you're going to have to go in and continually update the platform. And so you have to have a plan going forward to do that. On the content side, we built ours almost exclusively off of existing content. You want to look for content that is mobile-friendly, which means if you've got stuff that's really long pieces of content, you're going to want to break it up into something that looks good on a small screen. it's different than a mobile website. It's more and less than a mobile website. We chose to only limit it to about 25 pieces of content. We don't do any form content, no automated documents, no video, although we could now do some of those things. It's all, but it also allows us to tap into things like contacts and calendars that you can't do with a mobile website. Once we got all the coding done, the next thing we did was we actually had usability testing. We were fortunate enough to have some folks from University of Michigan come down and actually do usability testing for us. And basically what that means is we design scenarios. We say, here's a situation, you're looking for a divorce. Here's the app, go through and do it. And at the same time, they're watching and creating a report. We also have a video camera set up to record what the users are doing. And then we take that usability report and decide what the next steps for enhancements to the app's work. Our lesson sort of learned is to set the project scope, expect to have to continue to do ongoing maintenance. You have to test a lot, especially if you're doing anything on Android, because there's 400 and something minimum, 400 different variations of Android devices. Outreach is really, really important. And what we're questioning now, 2 years into this, is was this really worth all of the 800 hours of my time that were spent into the development of it? We've had about 800 downloads, and on the one hand, we're not sure that doing this it was worth it for the mobile app itself, but there were a lot of sort of secondary benefits that came out of it, particularly around PR and outreach and additional technology expertise. If you're interested in more information on our project, our documentation is on our website on the research and development page. And I'm going to turn this over to Tony, who will talk about their mobile app.
Great, thank you. Okay. Oops. All right. Not sure the right screen is showing. Is it showing the presenter view or the actual slide?
I see the slide.
Okay. Great. So my name is Tony Liu. I am the Citizenship Works Project Coordinator for the Immigration Advocates Network, and I'm going to talk similar to Gwen's presentation. I'm going to talk about our experience developing a mobile app and a lot of the things that we've learned in the process. Apologies for the animation. I have to strip those out. So we'll be talking about kind of just following from beginning to end in a very similar fashion the process we went through, starting with brainstorming and defining the requirements, and then going on to talk about wireframes and design, as well as coming up with a content strategy, and then the actual building and testing process. And then if there's time, I'll go through a little demonstration of the app through an emulator, but if not, it's the Android version's available for download, and the iOS will be soon. So brainstorming and requirements. In our experience, one of the things that we always try to do is to clearly define the scope of any tech project. I think for the app, it's actually really, really important, particularly if it's your first one. You want to avoid any kind of scope creep by not having defined things clearly. And then, in retrospect, I think we tried to adhere to making sure that we were trying to not be too ambitious with the features, because we wanted to make sure that we got the ones that we were adding right, and then you always approach it with the mindset that you can always add features later. My volume let me see if my gain is all the way up on my mic, so hopefully that's better. And I will speak closer to the mic. Hopefully that's improved. And as I was saying, you don't want to take the kitchen sink approach and try to build one app that does everything right off the bat. And there may be certain functionality that may make more sense as its own standalone app later on. In terms of defining the business requirements, you want to assess your team. At ILAO, they have internal capacity to develop a mobile app. For us, we ended up outsourcing it to a company called American Eagle, and they were contracted to build our Android app. And then after that, because of their familiarity with our app, we re-upped with them to do our iOS version. But one thing about outsourcing is you have to be absolutely clear about your specific business requirements, and it's just for logistics reasons, it's hard to have an organic development process. And so really, really defining your requirements is important. Doing a thorough scenario map for anything that has any kind of logic, responsive logic built in. So any of you who are familiar with developing document assembly interviews through A to J Author or HotDocs Developer and hosting them on LawHope Interactive are probably familiar with this idea of trying to come up with a logic tree that defines all of the possible scenarios and outcomes of different answers, and then creating a comprehensive requirements document that will capture all of the work that you've done to define all of this. So this is an example of the logic workflow for one of the features of our app. One of the features is that it helps people who are interested in applying for citizenship determine whether or not they've been physically present in the United States for enough time to qualify for naturalization. And as you can see, those green boxes, there's actually 5 different outcomes, but multiple different paths that lead to those 5 different outcomes. And so working through this and creating this diagram was an important part for our contract developers to understand how to write the logic for that calculator. And this was done using an online service called MindMeister, I think. MindMeister is an online sort of workflow diagramming software as a service application that I think you can create up to 3 free diagrams. So wireframes and design. So I think Gwen talked a little bit about the importance of doing this. So coming up with wireframes to really define the skeleton of the app, and this is something that you don't have to have a whole lot of tech background to do, or any at all, as long as you're somewhat familiar with using applications like PowerPoint. And in fact, I used Keynote on the Mac version of the presentation software to create our wireframes. And the reason for us to do that in a lot of ways was to spot a lot of UI, user interface and user experience issues early on as we were kind of working through the different feature sets. So this is an example of a wireframe that I created using Keynote, just to kind of show the layout of a page. And what this also helps us to do was envision kind of the limitations on content. And as lawyers, we sometimes have a tendency to be a little bit too wordy, and so actually seeing the physical limitations by constraining yourself to the dimensions of the screen really helped us to figure out, okay, so that's what this text needs to be limited to. Another example of an interactive checklist and sort of demonstrating what checking off a box would do, and that again, because we were contracting with outside coders, was important to be able to demonstrate that type of interaction. We also designed our own custom content management system, and so this is a wireframe I created for our internal coders here at Pro Bono Net to give a sense of the different fields that we would need for our own content management system. And then further down the development process, taking some of the initial mock-ups from our external contractors and changing the mock-up a little bit and annotating was a critical part of providing feedback. So some design considerations. We wanted to make sure that we unified the design with our website. So we stuck to a similar color scheme and the typeset, the fonts. And then we reused a lot of the same images. So some of the stock images of individuals, we reused that to create a sense of continuity, as well as the icons. And then one thing that we had a lot of fun with was merging design elements and user interface, particularly important because of the minimal screen real estate that you have on mobile designs or mobile devices. So, for example, in some instances, our logo is actually a tappable button that takes you to the home page. And so things that we wouldn't necessarily put energy into on the website, we did that with the mobile app to maximize use of every pixel on the screen. For content strategy, so for the static content, stuff that would be kind of coded into the app itself, we tried to emphasize front-loading the work of preparing that content, and couldn't avoid having to go back and change that. And again, because it's external coders, there's a little bit of friction involved in getting them to change text when you're testing prototypes and beta, alpha, and beta builds. And then trying to also make sure that because it's a mobile device, you want to focus on brevity and keeping text short, particularly on such a small screen. And then with flexible content, we feed content in several different ways. One is, as I mentioned, we have our own custom content management system, though there are many out-of-the-box solutions that will generate feeds that can be integrated into a mobile device. And then you want to make sure that you kind of figure out the delivery workflows. So in building our content management system, we wanted to make sure we had a way to preview content before we actually pushed it live to every device that's out there that has the app. So we created a staging feed. And so there's an Easter egg hidden in our mobile app where if you know the Easter egg, you can actually pull from the staging feed and see what the text will look like. And then we also have dynamic content that comes from the Pro Bono Net platform. So we're pulling from the directory, the Pro Bono Net directory tool right now, and in the future hope to also implement a feed from the Pro Bono Net calendar tool. And a couple more points, and then I'll answer some of the questions that have come through. So because we had external developers, we instituted a policy of weekly check-in calls. And that's, at times we would have to rope in the actual coders in addition to the project manager at our contractor, and then making sure that, that we were just regularly communicating. And this also, the frequency and the length of these calls also depends a lot on how thorough your requirements document is. Having a collaborative project management system is key, so it was like a ticketing system that they set up, and so that way, because there's so many moving parts in these apps, we could get a bird's eye view, but also drill down into specific issues and bugs that were coming up. And then being flexible in terms of your requirements, making sure that you don't adhere to your initial requirements document in lockstep, and being, discovering that maybe doing things slightly differently might be a good idea. Actually, I think resulted in a better app. The testing piece, I cannot emphasize, and Gwen mentioned this also, that you can't set aside enough time for testing. Because we started on the Android platform, we had to make sure that we had multiple different Android devices, some of the older ones, some of the newer ones, and because our developers didn't have old Android devices, they only had new ones, we kept having to go back to them with, well, this isn't showing up on these cheaper Android phones. And you can't just design for the fanciest Android phones. So having those devices to test and to give feedback is really important. And then you can also use emulators, but emulators are not perfect. As you'll see, I put there that I have a love-hate relationship with the emulators because they give you a sense of what's going on, but it's not really kind of an accurate indicator of what's going to happen in the field. And then fragmentation, both in Android and iOS, is always going to be an issue. Even though in iOS they don't have a clear delineation in the line of their products, there's different generations of devices, and we've already noticed differences in the way the latest generation of the iPhone handles some of our features that the older generation doesn't handle properly. So just some considerations to keep in mind. I don't think I have time for a demonstration, but Xander, do I have time to hit some of these questions that came up?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. We chose a mobile app partly for performance issues rather than a mobile optimized website. We're doing some stuff with graphics, such as and also because we wanted to be able to allow our users to use it offline. We have study flashcards for the naturalization test, the 100 questions that people need to study for to become a citizen to pass the test. We also have multimedia sections that allow people to practice reading and writing, and so that had to be built as an app as opposed to a mobile optimized website. And then, and yes, so some parts of our app are actually updated using the CMS. We're able to push changes to the content from a content management system as opposed to having to write into the code. Essentially, what that does is it generates an XML document that is that the app checks against to see if there's a newer version, and if there's a newer version, it will overwrite certain sections of our app. In particular, the flashcards, if those ever change, as well as certain sections on just the basic eligibility requirements for naturalization. But we don't actually overwrite the entire app every time when we want to change certain sections of the content. So just the final comment on some Android apps only work when they have connectivity. We wanted to make sure that the sections of the app that we wanted users to be able to use offline would still function if they didn't have connectivity. So there are certain features like the Find Legal Help feature, which actually pulls from the Pro Bono Net directory feed. If you're not online, it won't be able to send a query to the Pro Bono Net servers to find legal service providers in your area based on your location. So that part of it won't work, but we did make sure to tell our developers we want people to be able to study flashcards when they're in the subway, for example. So that's something that you can work with a developer to ensure. So I think I hit most of those questions, and if there are more questions, definitely feel free to contact me. And I think most folks should know how to reach me, but you can also find me through the Pro Bono Net or Immigration Advocates Network website. And with that, who am I passing this on to? Xander, am I passing it back to you?
No, you're passing it on to Liz.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Okay. Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about a project that is in the planning stages right now, and in that way has really benefited from a lot of the information that folks like Gwen and Tony and staff at Pine Tree and others who have been working in the mobile space for a while have shared. So this is a TAKE-funded project to Legal Aid Services of Northeastern Minnesota, and it's focused on providing, using mobile strategies to provide support to advocates in contexts where it can be particularly difficult to provide other kinds of comprehensive support. So this is a 2013 TIG, and the grantee is Legal Aid Services of Northeastern Minnesota, and the project partners are Legal Services State Support, the Minnesota State Bar Association, and Pro Bono Net. And the kinds of resources that this project will develop include a mobile version of ProJustice MN, the statewide advocate pro bono support site in Minnesota that's built on the pro bono platform. And that mobile version will feature mobile-optimized settlement checklists and client interview guides. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how the partners involved in this project arrived at these two different types of content and how they relate to delivering resources in a mobile context. So starting with the checklists, settlements often happen in court on short notice, but elements of a settlement in any area can have benefits and pitfalls that an inexperienced attorney might overlook. So an example might be in a custody dispute where the parties might agree to a simple framework for custody, but forget to specify arrangements for important holidays, which can lead to more litigation and unnecessary acrimony. So checklists, whether they're mobile optimized or not, can really support this process, and in particular, less experienced volunteer attorneys. It can help them feel more confident responding to on-the-spot settlement opportunities while helping to ensure that clients obtain a well-crafted settlement. So because of the sort of rapidly evolving context of these kinds of negotiations, we thought that these kinds of checklists were particularly well suited for a mobile version that can be accessed via a smartphone or tablet. So, and in the same vein, the mobile client interview guides are a kind of resource that can provide support to staff and volunteer attorneys in on-the-go settings such as drop-in clinics, which are a staple of volunteer attorney work, outreach settings, or other kinds of field work. And through these kinds of standardized guides, the intent is to help practitioners get a more complete and relevant set of information from clients, which in turn can help them identify nuances in the individual's issue and provide better quality advice. So we also anticipate that these mobile interview guides will help attorneys be able to zero in on important issues faster, making walk-in clinics or other kinds of outreach sessions more efficient overall. So those are the two types of content that this project is focusing on, and the technical approach draws on some of the same kinds of technologies that have been mentioned throughout this presentation. So PBN is developing an HTML5 mobile website application, not a native app like Tony just described, but a mobile web app for the Pro Bono Net platform, and that will include a mobile-specific user interface. The tools to author and publish the checklist and guide content will be integrated with the main ProJustice MN administrative interface, but support cross-publishing between the main site and the mobile version through the Pro Bono Net API. And one addition here is that alongside the checklists and the interview guides, ProJustice MN administrators will be able to present links or kind of previews of related content that lives on the main ProJustice MN site. And after a pilot stage in Minnesota, these capabilities and authoring tools will be made available to other sites in the Pro Bono Net network. So we're just about 6 months in, so we're just finishing up the technical specifications for the project now, and we'll beginning development in the second half of the year. But the other part of the planning process that the project partners just completed was a survey of pro bono coordinators and volunteer attorneys to help identify priority areas for checklist and interview guide content development. The Legal Services State Supported Minnesota developed and administered the survey, and I've excerpted some results here. This first slide is data from about 40 respondents who self-identified as volunteer attorneys or prospective volunteer attorneys. And they were asked which areas have or would you find settlement checklists most useful. So on the left, those are just standard settlement checklists. And then on the right, we asked specifically about mobile checklists. And you can see there's some overlap here between both. And that divorce, custody, landlord-tenant kind of rose to the top in both cases. The volunteer attorneys in that second question were asked to consider areas they haven't volunteered yet in, but might be willing to consider with these additional kinds of supports. The survey also asked about the priority areas for content development around the client interview guides, and I've included all of the responses received here because I think they're interesting and wide-ranging. But the top results, again, sort of mapped to similar issues that we saw with the checklist: divorce, child custody, landlord-tenant, bankruptcy, wills, and trusts. So this project will develop 10 guides and 10 checklists in these areas. One of the other things that was asked on the survey that may be of interest to folks developing either mobile web apps or native apps were how volunteers envision engaging with this kind of content beyond reading them on their phone or tablet. What other kinds of functionality and support would they want? And the ones that came through really clearly here were the ability to email the resource to themselves or to others, to download the resource to access offline, and print resources where a printing option is available, and to a lesser extent the ability to check off or annotate sections that had been addressed and save favorite resources to an online briefcase for easy access later. And that ability to email resources to themselves or others for access later also came through quite strongly in user testing that Pro Bono Net did with Montana Legal Services Association for the Law Help mobile project, and specifically on the Montana Law Help mobile website. So that was something we hadn't kind of built in the first phase, but based on user feedback and stakeholder feedback, that was added both for resources and the ability as well for somebody to send themselves a link to a detailed referral listing for reference later. So I've included the project context here, but would be happy to take any questions and also hopefully be able to report out on maybe share some previews of the designs when the project is a little bit further along later this year. Okay, so should I pass this back to you, Xander?
That would be great. And again, there continues to be a really great conversation going on in the chat box around sort of mobile optimized versus web app features. And so if you get a chance, it's a really interesting sort of back and forth. To sort of wrap things up, I just wanted to point out very briefly, some additional sort of technologies that are that other folks are using, and certainly other areas are taking advantage of. The first one is looking at geolocation. And, we know that in other fields, folks are looking to mobile as a way to collect data, to crowdsource mapping information, either through an SMS program, where people text in various information about where they are, photos, materials like that. Also, geolocation within a mobile context can include things like creating just static Google Maps that are really optimized for the mobile browsing experience. The things that very easily sort of integrate into your into your site that will show just in a static way where an office is or where a court is, and also as a way to deliver services using an interactive geolocation to find offices, to find courts, which would be more sort of analogous to Google Maps. There was a really great article in the N10 recently that N10 put up on their blog about the various uses of geolocation and examples of different not-for-profits that were using it, and I'm sending that out into the chat box now. That I'd encourage folks to take a look at. Also, kind of looking ahead, and it was mentioned earlier that there was a question on mobile video and sort of why do videos work on some platforms and not. And Brian had mentioned that YouTube, one of the reasons that LSNTAP uses YouTube is that it hosts on mobile. There is a hosting service that is mobile accessible. Facebook as well is also accessible on many different platforms. There are some special considerations when thinking about using video in a mobile context, specifically that things like close-up shots would be more visible than long distances because you're just on a smaller screen. Also, things like where users are accessing that video or that app, or really any mobile site, that if you've got any sort of audio, being able to have very short messages, or any video, very short messages are really important. So while there are these really great things that mobile can bring to the table, there are very specific special considerations when creating content, especially. There are some not-for-profits also that are using video that somebody can access on a desktop that actually interacts with cell phone users to bring various users into the video experience in a more interactive way. So, for example, Planned Parenthood has a couple of videos where, to find out the end of the video, you text into a Planned Parenthood number, just the way that you would do in the SMS campaigns that we were talking about earlier, and it unlocks sort of the end of the video. So it's a way to engage all users, regardless of whether they have the ability to view a video on their screen, to really be able to interact with your content. Mobile also creates an opportunity for user-generated content. Most smartphones have a camera option, and some of those camera options, as we've seen, are really pretty amazing. So that sort of opportunity for users themselves to be able to create video or create content, and then for various uses of that within civil legal services is a really interesting kind of on the horizon option. There was also one other technology that I wanted to just touch on, and that's the integrative voice response. And it allows a computer to interact with humans through the use of voice, so very similar to those menus that are that ask you to say one, and it takes you to sort of the next option. And the reason that I put it here is, number one, we don't really think about this as a mobile technology, even though obviously folks can and do use it on their mobile devices. Also, we don't always think about this as a way to deliver services, but with both examples from emergency services to really looking at user groups that may not have access to smartphones, may not have access to the internet, as a way of getting out alerts or news or information, especially in multiple languages. this is one that I think bears some additional consideration. It's actually being used in various parts of Africa as a way to interact and to get out very specific news alerts to more remote regions. And for some examples, and I'm going to send out an URL with an example of that right now, just as some additional as an additional idea that's sort of floating around out there. So if folks, so that's sort of what we have today, and if folks either want to type in, we have a few minutes left if people either want to unmute and ask some questions or type them into the chat box, we can take those for the next few minutes. All right. And all right, so feel free to reach out to any of the participants. Brian Rowe's contact information is up on the screen, and don't forget to take the feedback survey at SurveyMonkey. The link is right there and is also now out in your chat box. So thank you all for. Oh, I'm sorry. And the slides and the recording will be posted, and it will be posted on YouTube, as well as on the Pro Bono Net library. And there will be an email that will go around once those things are posted. So be on the lookout for that. So thank you all.